Welcome to the newly revamped Hoxworth Unfiltered podcast with Hoxworth Blood Center, University of Cincinnati. I am your co-host, Ashley Smith, with the founding podcast namesake, Dr. O, of course, as you know, in the know with Dr. O. Now, in future episodes, we'll have different segments on the podcast featuring Dr. Alquist, local businesses, and of course, donors and recipients. But because we are just coming back from a little bit of a hiatus from the podcast, we wanted to start with kind of like a blood banking 101. We're calling it no dumb questions. So we always heard in school, there are no stupid questions. You know, you just ask the question and the teacher will answer. So you're the professor today.
Oh gosh, okay.
So Dr. O, for those that
I go Socratic method, so I may be asking you a bunch of questions.
That's okay. We can do it. It can go both ways. But for those that maybe are new to the podcast, please give us a little bit of a background about yourself and your history with blood banking.
Sure. So my name's David O. I'm physician. I trained in, I'll give you my whole life story.
Let's go for it.
Born and raised in Wisconsin. I did my undergrad in Madison as well as my medical school. Went to Cleveland Clinic for 5 years. I did a pathology residency there. That's what a lot of blood bankers do, actually, who are physicians who specialize in blood banking. So I spent 5 years there. I actually spent a couple years in Salt Lake City. I studied computers in medicine in a program called medical informatics. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to come back to Wisconsin, and I did a fellowship in transfusion medicine, blood banking at Blood Center of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. After the fellowship, I worked for a couple years with Red Cross in the Toledo area. I worked for about 10 years in San Diego as the chief medical officer of the San Diego Blood Bank, which was a community nonprofit blood collection and distributing center. And then I worked for about 4 or 5 years at Stanford as a associate professor there from 2013 to 2017. Moved from there to my current position at University of Cincinnati, Hoxworth Blood Center, and I'm now was hired as chief medical officer, and I'm now co-chair with Dr. Alquist and co-director of the Hoxworth Blood Center.
Okay, so because, you know, obviously we're at UC and we're part of UC in, you know, big part of Cincinnati, I have to ask you, Skyline, Gold Star.
So it's okay to say one or the other?
Sure.
I'm a Skyline guy. Yeah,
okay, that's a good answer.
Yeah, but, you know, I probably haven't given Gold Star enough of a chance, right? So I always go to Skyline because I love Skyline. Yeah. So.
Okay, good answer. You know, I only have it, I would say, maybe once every couple of months, but it hits the spot when you have it.
So I got used to Skyline when I was a resident in Cleveland, and one of my best friends there was had done his medical school at Cincinnati, and so they have Skylines in Cincinnati and Cleveland, and so I went, and of course for me it was like, first time I went, I didn't come back for like a month or two, and then I was like, okay, I think I want to try that again. Yeah. And then it's like every week I'm like back. So I love Skyline.
They have like some addictive qualities. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into it. And remember, you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to roll your eyes. You're not allowed to say, Ashley, what are you thinking? These are things that, because, you know, I just started here in January, knew a little bit about blood banking. We all remember high school science class, whatever, but you really, there's some things that I feel like people don't want to ask because they feel like they should already know. So now we're gonna fill them all in. Bring them into
Let's do it.
Okay. Everyone has a blood type. There are 8 kinds of blood, as we know. What do these blood types mean? In other words, when we see the positive, the negative, the A, the B, what does these blood types mean?
So it's interesting you said there were 8 blood types. So we'll just start there. So I would say there's really 4 major blood groups that are there, but it's a weird combination, right? So people know typically that they're type O, or they're type A, or they're type B, or they're type AB. Mm-hmm. So those to me are the big 4. Okay. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, what's the difference, right, between them? And so around 1900, there's this guy, Karl Landsteiner, who I think of as the father of modern transfusion medicine. And before that, transfusion was very rarely performed. It was kind of playing Russian roulette because you could get transfused, and if you got the wrong blood type, you could have an acute hemolytic transfusion reaction and die. And that was kind of par for the course, right? So if transfusion had been something that we could do and we had the science understanding, we would have done a lot of transfusions during the Civil War, right? Yeah. Because you think of piles of arms and legs and all the amputations and the surgeries that occurred back then. But there are just not very many, recorded episodes of trying to do transfusion, because we know if you give the wrong transfusion from the wrong donor to the recipient, that will cause death. And so Karl Landsteiner, around 1900, 1901, identified the major blood group antigens A and B substance. And so really, when you are born, you're either going to be you're going to either have a gene that creates a carbohydrate group on the surface of the red cell, so an antigen that's an A type or a B type, and those form because everybody typically has what we call an H antigen on the red cell. So when you're type O, that actually means that you've got this H antigen floating around on the surface of your blood cells. If you're type A, you have inherited a specific enzyme that ends up altering the H antigen, so it becomes this A antigen. So you can think of it as an A antigen enzyme, and the names are long, so I'm not going to go into those right now. But if you're a type B person, then you've inherited a different enzyme that causes the H antigen to be changed into this B antigen. And then if you're a type AB person, you've inherited the A enzyme and the B enzyme, probably one from both parent. And so you're AB, and then you would have both A and B substance on your red cells, because both those enzymes will work on the H antigen, and some of them will convert to A and some of them will convert to B. So those are the four major blood groups. So if you're type O, you've got kind of H antigen floating around. If you're type A, you've got H antigen there, but a lot of it's been converted to this A antigen. If you're type B, you've got this other enzyme that's created this B antigen. And if you're type AB, you've got both enzymes, and so you're creating both A and B antigen on your red cells. So the big thing with Landsteiner is he identified these antigens, and then he has a corollary to his rule, which is these A and B antigens are really commonly found in the environment. So if you're not an A group person, you will form antibodies to A. So you don't have to be exposed to it in terms of red cell transfusions or anything else, but you just naturally will have anti-A if you're a type O person and you don't have A on your own red cells. If you're a type A person, you have these enzymes and they cause these antigens to be present in your red cells, and your body learns that, hey, that's self. I'm not going to destroy those cells. But otherwise, if you're a type O, you're like, oh, I'm going to destroy anything that has either A or B antigen on it. And so so you identify self versus non-self. So if you're a type O person, you really need to get O blood as your transfused product. If you get transfused with A blood, that means the red cells that you're getting transfused with have A antigen present on them, and your antibodies, your immune defense is going to target those and say, oh my gosh, these cells have no right being in my body, and they destroy them, and they cause hemolysis or lysis or destruction of those cells in the bloodstream, and that's very, very damaging and can cause death. So that's essentially the four major blood groups that we talk about. You talked about 8, so you're probably talking about RH, throwing RH in there as well. So that's when we talk about being positive or negative, right? So so RH is if you're O positive, like I'm O positive, then that means that you have D present on your red cells. So it's a D antigen. I know we use all these letters, but it's a good way to represent what's on the surface of the cells symbolically. So if you're Rh negative, then you don't have this D antigen on your red cells. And so if you, and it's not as immunogenic as the A and B antigens, because those are kind of bigger and more bulky. And so with the Rh, you don't naturally develop those antibodies unless you're exposed to Rh positive or D antigen in your life. And so if you're born as Rh positive, like I am O positive, and 85% of Caucasians out there are Rh positive, for Asians it's much higher actually, you're not going to form antibody to Rh because you have that present. And so you can receive pretty much anybody's blood, whether it's Rh positive or negative, aside from the ABO side, right? If you're Rh negative and you get a transfusion that is Rh positive, then you have about a 20% chance of forming that antibody. So in the future, if you get exposed to Rh positive cells, you are at risk for a lot of destruction from those cells as well. So that type is kind of where sometimes we'll talk about 8 blood groups versus 4 blood groups.
Right. Okay. So, and then you kind of answered this, but are blood types genetic? You said you get from mom and dad.
Yes.
Okay. So if your siblings could be different because maybe they got one from mom and not one from dad, right? Okay.
So typically you inherit one of the enzymes from each parent, or you have a lack of enzymes. There are some weird cases where A and B can be inherited together, and it's that's rare. So people who are doing like paternity testing at home, like you have to be careful with that. So you see your doctor about that, because there can be differences. But it's not uncommon for an A parent to have an O child.
Okay.
Even a mom and dad who are both A may have inherited like O from one parent and A from another. The other inherited O from one parent, A enzyme from another. And then when they're combined, like 1/4 of those will be O, and then half will be heterozygous or A, and then 1/4 will be A from both parents, and that will phenotypically look the same in terms of being A. So 3 out of 4 will be A positive. Yeah.
So when we talk about blood transfusions, what is a blood transfusion? I mean, obviously for us, we're getting donors to give us this blood, and then we're transfusing it. Yep. Not us, but doctors are transfusing it.
You're part of the family now. Yeah.
So what is a blood transfusion by definition?
Yeah, so that pretty much is it, right? Okay. So it's blood from one person going to another person. So I think of the person who's donating as the donor, and the person who's receiving the blood as the recipient or the patient.
So are they putting it into their vein in the OR, or are they, or the hospital room? I guess it doesn't have to be in the OR, but I watch Grey's Anatomy. It's oftentimes in the OR. So are they putting it? Is there a needle into that patient? I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So typically, it's infused the way other intravenous solutions would be infused, or products. When you donate blood, it's weird to think about, right? That like what is actually getting transfused? So we do processing of the blood that people are donating. So when you donate, so we have people donate different products, right? So let's just talk about whole blood, which is the vast majority of the products we collect. If you go to a blood drive, a bus shows up, and essentially they're taking 500 mils from you, and there's kind of a shaker, scale that they're using. That's typically whole blood donation, and you're done in like 10 minutes in terms of the donation time. From beginning to end, it takes about an hour to donate whole blood. That whole blood then gets moved back to the Hoxworth building and our processing laboratory, and a number of things can happen. One, we could end up, if the donor is an O-pos and it's a repeat donor, that donation actually could be used as whole blood. So we would actually not even want to separate it into red cells and plasma. So there's a certain number of products that would come back where we're like, okay, this will be good for whole blood. We will do some testing on that to qualify it, and then we do infectious disease testing on every single donation that occurs. But essentially, we'll provide that product back. We transfer it into a different bag that has ports that we can hook up to a patient line. So the collection bag is kind of different than the transfusion bag. Okay. And typically in the processing process, the final bag will be a different bag than the one that was collected in, right? So, and then that will be allow the nurses to be able to hook it up and to be able to transfuse it to the recipients. But essentially for whole blood, that's it. Like, so we collect it, we do testing on it, and then it's given without a lot of manipulation. Most of the whole blood we collect will get spun down and separated into red cells or plasma. And so we will then have a red cell, and we separate it, we spin it down in a centrifuge. It separates by density. So you have a red cell layer and then a plasma layer on top. The red cell layer is red and the plasma layer is yellow. It's actually what happens. Yeah. And then you express off, or you squeeze off the plasma into a connected bag, and then you stop it. We're at the interface between the two. And you leave a little bit of plasma in the red cells so that it's bathing kind of in that milieu. And then that's your red cell component. and then we'll add to that red cell component. We'll separate it out. We'll add to that red cell component preservative or additive solution, or AS solution, and that will extend the life of that product from 21 days to 42 days.
Wow.
For plasma, then we're left with a plasma, and we actually usually just freeze that, and then that's good for 12 months, and we're able to give that as plasma to be thawed at the hospital and then transfused to somebody who needs it.
That's why they say fresh frozen plasma.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's fresh frozen plasma is plasma that's frozen within 8 hours of collection.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also use another plasma called FP24, pretty much interchangeably, which is frozen within 24 hours of the time of collection. So those two are pretty much used interchangeably. But yeah, those are both usually derivatives of a whole blood donation.
And then what are platelets?
So platelets are used to be a third component that we would get from that whole blood donation. So there's an interface between the red cells and the plasma, and that's where the white cells and the platelets will hang out. Yeah. And so we used to, in old days, take that buffy coat layer, essentially, and then manipulate it again and spin it down and just get the platelet layer as much, and then pool 5 or 6 of them together. And then that would be one dose of platelets. So like a 6-pack would be like one dose of what we currently get from, equivalent to one dose of platelets that we collect from donors who just donate platelets on the machines that we have for them. That went out of favor. Essentially, when I got here at Cincinnati, we were still doing it. So it was like 7 years ago, but very, very few blood centers were doing it. And, but it's coming back into favor because we have new automation that will allow us to do it more effectively and efficiently to pool those platelets together. So a technological advance has allowed us to really come back to that technology, and we've just started doing that here at Hoxworth Blood Center. But essentially, that would be whole blood derived platelets, where they're kind of pooled from a number of different donors, 4 to 6 donors. The typical way we collect platelets is through an apheresis collection or an automated collection, and we have dedicated donors who come in. They spend an hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours on these machines, and we are able to collect up to 3 units of platelets every single time that they donate, which is equal to like 3 units of platelets would be equal to like 18 blood donor-derived pooled platelets. That's true. So it's really it's great for our patients because they get a bigger dose in one place, single donor exposure. But it's very time-consuming for our donors, and so we really have to have them dedicated to be able to do that.
And they are. When I talk to them at the neighborhood donor centers, I'm sure you've talked to them too. I mean, they are in there regularly. They can donate every 2 weeks, and a lot of them do. And maybe every 3 weeks. I mean, they don't go very far, so we do appreciate all of those donors. Why do cancer patients need blood? A lot of times we talk about, especially leukemia, things like that, those patients, a lot of patients at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Why do those type of patients need blood?
So a lot of times the blood cells that we have are created in the bone marrow. And unfortunately, a lot of cancer treatments are really rough on the bone marrow. Okay. And so they can't produce cells for themselves, especially for like blood-related cancers where they go through chemotherapy treatments and just are not able to create the number of blood cells because their bone marrow gets shut down by the chemotherapeutic treatment chemicals. And so we actually have to support a lot of these patients with donated blood. All types, so platelets, red cells, plasma, to be able to get them through the tough treatments that they have to go through.
Okay, I did not know that. So it's actually because a lot of times because they're doing chemo, and it's kind of the other things that come with cancer, but their cells are being broken down.
So a lot of times with blood therapies, we are supporting patients through kind of the treatments that they're receiving and through their entire illness. So it's interesting. A lot of times we say, donate, platelets and save a life. It's a lot of times the unit is just really part of a whole armament that is being tossed at these poor patients. And it's just part of the support therapies that are available to them to get through.
I'm sure you're familiar with Super Cohen, one of our recipients. He comes to Children's Hospital more frequently than we would like, but every time his mom posts on Facebook, thank you to all of the blood donors. So to put a face with the donation is really nice. And hopefully he's doing well. I know he was just getting treatment recently. We talk about that blood is regulated by the FDA.
Yep.
It is basically regulated like a drug. So
so it actually is a drug.
It is a drug,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's literally man-made.
Man
and woman-made.
So it's both a drug and it's a biologic.
Okay.
So with biologics, there's just inherent variability because it's from people and different people. And so, you have a 120-pound person come and donate versus a 300-pound person come donate. It's a different thing. So
right.
a 20-year-old versus a 70-year-old. There's a lot of variability that occurs in that process.
So it's 2025 as we record this right now. Can blood be manufactured? Can it be made in a lab?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is certainly not in large scale.
Okay.
So I think that there are some researchers who have proven, it's a proof of concept, I guess, in terms of, you can, have certain cell lines that can create cells. But a lot of trying to create like blood in a factory type of a situation, assuming you can't do like a matrix type of thing and imprison people in the capsules. Okay. But if you're trying to use cells and create a vat of cells that are it's a lot of blood is like micro architecture and micro environmental, and in the setting of a bone marrow, which is like an incredibly complex system, right? Biological system, and the spacing and the positioning of cells together and the way that they work to be able to create these blood cell lines and to keep them going is not as simple as just having a open vat, and then throwing in stem cells and then saying, okay, produce red cells. It's a lot more complicated. And so we have not, Mother Nature is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And we have not efficiently been able to manufacture red cells and other blood components in a factory.
Yeah, this is why we rely on
Yeah.
donors.
Still, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why isn't blood kept on an ambulance?
So some blood is starting to be kept on ambulances.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting thing. So it's interesting. So Hoxworth has been, it's been great to be here because we do so much with trauma patients, and we have supported some air evac, many air evac, I think 17 or 19, I can't even remember, different air evac programs so that the helicopters that are there are able to carry blood. And that has been, sometimes the helicopters have longer flight trips, and it's just been something that has been more advantageous to have blood available for those helicopters. And they're less in number, so it's like less blood that actually has to be stored and carried on them. We actually recommend as a blood product for that plasma versus the red cells or whole blood. Whole blood is great, but it's doesn't last as long as the plasma, and it's actually much more expensive as well, and not all blood that's carried on the helicopters gets to be transfused. So plasma has been found to be really helpful with trauma patients to restore coagulation factors as well as other proteins that are able to support the endothelial structure. And so it's something where we actually recommend liquid plasma and then red cells if they want them as well. So components of red cells, and those can last up to 42 days. Typically, whole blood is only good for 21 days, and with that short expiration time, it's a little tough to be able to carry at the expense of doing it. There are, I think, 2 of the air carriers that we provide to do carry whole blood, and then the other, I think 17 do not. We've been approached by a number of EMS programs that have the ambulances. One of the things with the ambulances, if the ambulance ride is only like 4 minutes away, it's probably better just to transport the patients to the hospital and then just transfuse them immediately in the ER area. Some of the helicopters will take a little bit longer with their flight, or we think that it's probably more advantageous to give it. We've been approached by EMS services that do have like a longer drive, typically to a trauma level 1 place. And so they're very interested, and they're going to start carrying liquid plasma as well as red cells to begin with, and see kind of how that goes.
So this is kind of on the forefront of this, as we speak right now. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it. I think Delaware, I went to a talk at a recent conference, and Delaware as a state is covered, by EMS that's carrying blood with
Wow.
them. And so it is starting to be more popular. And it's really the thought that a unit of blood in the pre-hospital setting can have much more impact in terms of saving lives than a unit that's given to somebody who's on the floor, who just has a lower, blood level.
Right.
So I think that's really where we can make a huge impact in terms of the blood that's donated for us and we make available. Yeah.
Stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah.
We often say one donation can save up to 3 lives. Explain how we get that number.
Yeah. So that's not my favorite quote. But I think it's more true now that we're going back to the Revios, right?
Yes.
So that gained a lot of popularity, like I said before, when we were making platelets from whole blood collections. But we really had moved away from that, as well as almost all of the blood industry had moved away from creating that platelet layer, platelet product. But now that Revio, that we were implementing this new technology, I really think that that's true. So whole blood that is donated that we are able to process with this new technology is able to be split into a red cell component, a platelet component, which can be pooled with other platelets to form a pool of platelets, and then a plasma component. And so that kind of is the three products that are 3 ways you can save life with one donation.
Well, and we're saying with Revios, when we do take the platelets out, like you said, it has to be a few more people. So together, literally, you're saving lives, with a few of your best friends that you've never met before, maybe.
Well, that's one of the things about blood donation that I think is really cool is like, for almost all donations, and I donate blood too. And it's like you donate blood. You don't ask, this needs to go to my Aunt Sally. Yeah, this needs to go to, only people who look like me. Yeah. It goes and it's given to those who need it. Yes. And when you donate that you're doing something that we have asked people to do to help other people. And there's trust in Hoxworth to make sure that we're, handling it the right way and distributing it the right way. But I love it that here in Cincinnati, you give blood and it's going to go to one of the major hospitals here that almost, well, what I can say is all the hospitals here get their blood from us. Right. So if you have somebody who is at Children's Hospital, or you have a neighbor who's at Children's Hospital and you donate, there's a chance your blood is going to go to that specific kid. But if not that person, it's going to go to somebody who is like that. And I think that's how we groom our donors to become platelet donors, because it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this just once or twice a year, right? With whole blood donation. Like there's got to be a way to donate more often. Yeah. And with platelets, it's great because it's such a high impact product. It has a short shelf life, unfortunately, and so it constantly needs to be replenished by donors. And so it's a great way to come back every 2 weeks and really form that bond with Hoxworth and with the community. And knowing that your gift is to somebody else who needs it here in the area. Yeah, they're going through a tough time. And they need it. Yeah. This is kind of a twofold question, but you've mentioned that we test the blood. I think you even mentioned a little bit about what we're testing for, but what are we testing that blood for, and why do you have to ask me? It's like 40 some questions if you're going to test it anyways. Yeah. So explain kind of that question. Right. It's like, aren't you testing it anyway? Yes. Blood safety, we think of it as like a 2-tier system, or a belt and suspenders system a little bit. And with any tests that you perform, medical tests that you perform, so our screening tests I would include with that, donor screening tests, there are false positives and there are false negatives that occur. No test is 1,000% actually 1,000,000% right, Right. And so when we do our testing, we're worried that we could conceivably miss with just using the testing alone a true positive and end up transfusing it because our tests are falsely negative. And so when we ask our questions, we are eliminating people who are at higher risk, not even high risk, but higher risk for having some of the transfusion transmitted infections that we're really worried about. So hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, those are the big three, I think, that people are like, oh, I don't want to get when I donate,
right?
Or when I get a blood transfusion. And I guess for younger folks, they're not as worried about HIV, but for older folks like me who went to medical school during that time,
right?
It's like there was such a concern,
right.
Especially with receiving blood transfusions. So we do incredible testing on that, but we want to ask questions first to make sure that the donors are at low risk for them. So we'll ask, hey, have you had any new sexual partners in the last 30 days? Hey, have you had a new sexual partner in the last I think it's 3 months. Sorry, my time frame's a little confused. And if the answer to those questions is yes, then we'll ask another question, which is incredibly sensitive and but have you had anal sex in the last 3 months? And if the answer to that is yes, then we'll say, hey, could you not donate for 3 months to make sure that when we use our tests that they are as effective as they possibly can be. So one of the concerns we have is that there's a window period between the time of infection that people have and the time that our tests will turn positive, because just kind of biology, that's the way it works. If you get infected with hepatitis on day one, that test is not going to turn positive for at least a couple weeks. And so we don't want people to donate, for 30 days or for 3 months to make sure that we're conservative and we would catch any window period cases.
Right.
And so that will then make our positive predictive value and negative predictive value of the test that we get much higher. And it would allow us, especially for a negative predictive value, to know when we get a negative test that we can feel confident that is a true negative for us. And so by making the people who actually make it through the donation process to actually donate their blood to get tested, a low risk population, it ends up that we have much more confidence in our tests when they're negative, that there would not be transfusion transmitted diseases. And so now we're talking about transfusion transmissive diseases. I have to take a step and just say that blood transfusion is very safe today. It's in the 70s. It was, almost half of people who got transfused, or over half of people who got transfused, would get transfusion-transmitted hepatitis.
Wow.
It was crazy. We didn't even know back then what hepatitis C was, and so we would call it non-A, non-B hepatitis, because we knew what type A and type B were. And it ends up that hepatitis C, or non-A, non-B, was a major, major cause of transfusion-transmitted hepatitis. And we developed a test for HIV in 1985, and another test for hepatitis C in 1990. And then we developed even better, more sensitive tests in 2000, and we used both those tests as kind of, again, another belt and suspenders, but just on the testing side. And with those being negative, since 2000, I think there's been one case of hepatitis C virus transmission, which is crazy when you think like half of the transfusions were hepatitis C virus, the recipient would end up getting, or people who were transfused would get hepatitis. And then for HIV, very, very, very few, less than, I would say, 5, and not well-documented cases in 25 years. And so incredibly safe in terms of transfusion of blood products related to infectious disease.
That pretty much wraps up my questions. Do you have anything that you think people should know about blood banking that we didn't cover?
Gosh.
Besides, everything you've ever studied, but
the
basics.
No.
Do you think there's anything else they need to know?
It's interesting because some people will say, to get more people to donate, we have to talk more about, how blood is processed and where it goes and all these specifics of what indication. I think that a general understanding for a potential donor, that we are asking people to come in, roll up their sleeve. It is a pinprick, but we eliminated one of them, right? Yeah. Because you don't have to do the finger stick anymore. And then just knowing that donation that people have done is going to help somebody anonymously is really powerful. Like if you understand that as the story, and then you take away after you donate this sense of supporting the community, giving back, being selfless with that. There's a lot of power to that, right? So what do you get out of it? What does the donor get out of it? It's not the tchotchke, although this is a cool cup, so I would recommend that for anybody. But the T-shirt, whatever. That's a little thank you from us for people to come in and donate. We know that's not why people come in and donate.
Right.
what I want them to leave with is knowing that they did a good thing and that they should be proud of themselves, and hopefully that they want to come back and help somebody else in the future. And if we can help the donor feel better about what they're doing in their life and supporting others, as well as helping the recipient to receive the potentially life-saving product that they need, gosh, what a great job, And so, I guess I'd want people to, I'm not so worried about knowing the intimate details of blood transfusion, all that other stuff, but just to understand that this is a mechanism for people to be able to do good, that we're trying to make as easy as possible for people. And it's symbolically, it's giving of your own life fluids, right? To support somebody else. I think it's really impactful, and there are not many other ways that you can do that in today's society. You can give money. It seems like impersonal a little bit, but you can give money, but to actually give time, blood, pain, to help somebody else, like I feel always really special after I donate blood. So I wish more people could, I guess, experience that, and get feel rewarded for doing those types of things. And so I think it's a great thing to try to let people know more about.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming today
to
our first technical episode of Hoxworth Unfiltered.
Right.
So that's it for today's episode of Hoxworth Unfiltered. Thanks for tuning in, listening, and remember, there's nothing more powerful than sharing life through donation, as Dr. O just said. And if you learned something new today, share this episode with a friend, leave us a review, or hit that follow button so you never miss an update. And next time you're at a blood drive, you'll know more than just your blood type. Yeah. And until next time, stay curious, save lives, and keep it unfiltered.
Thank you.